Hi guys, and welcome to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Zayn Nabbi. As always, I have Courtney Freese, the former PSL winner, the best under 45 player this side of the equator in Essex. How are you doing, my brother?
Zayn, I'm in good form. I'm running at a good pace at the moment. 3 kilometers, I'm doing it in 11 and a half minutes.
That's better than when you were playing for Rangers.
I'm flying at the moment. I'm trying to get the Christmas weight off. I'm ready. My pre-season has started.
You look fantastic. And listen, we can't wait to get the bride fired up today. We are speaking to the assistant sporting director at Sundowns, Ryan Hunt. Ryan, welcome to the pod. You are at a club that has set the benchmark in South Africa. 7 out of the 9 league titles reside with Sundowns. You have many players who have gone all around the world, all over the continent, and been successful. You guys are the benchmark. You guys are the domineering force. You guys are the juggernaut. So we're so pleased to have you on the pod. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, and appreciate the kind words about the club. That is kind of our ambition, we do aim to be the best club in Africa. So we kind of look outside of South Africa. We be trying to compete consistently with Al Ahly, Zamalek, TP Mazembe. That is definitely our focus within the club, and it's the mantra of the club is to be the best club in Africa. So I appreciate the kind words.
No worries. And listen, Sundowns do have a sporting director. That role is currently occupied by Fleming Berg. He used to be a Chelsea scout. He was also the head of football development at the Danish Football Associations before he took up this role in 2022 at Sundowns. I'm interested. Could you explain how you work with Fleming and give the audience a broad overview of your role at the club?
Just to start with Fleming, he's a very intelligent person within football. I'm learning a lot from him. He understands the game at a level that I've kind of never seen before. And not just specifically on the field, off the field as well. He understands, a lot. And kind of the way I work with him is obviously he assigns, some tasks to me. There's obviously a lot of roles, within a sporting director. You have to control the youth academy and how, the coaches work. You have to, control the recruitment and how the club wants to recruit, who they're going to recruit. You have to manage with the first team and the coaches and style of play, your game model. So, there's so many different, and sorry, at Sundowns, our ladies team is very successful. Arguably the best team in Africa. So there's so many different components that it's too much for one person to handle. And Sundowns is a big club, so every specific department needs, very, appropriate detail. So that's where, I become a role player in, is because there's so many things that Fleming has to do that he can't get to everything. Like, for example, we're obviously looking to make partnerships with clubs and, develop talent throughout South Africa, not just Gauteng, and developing those partnerships and where to do it, how to do it. So like, for example, that's one of the things that I'm kind of doing at the moment. And then, developing a strategy for the club, making sure that the club or more molding, assisting the club in, any way that I can in how we want to be, for the next 5-10 years, to stay modern, bringing a level of data to the recruitment team, and then also in assessing players. So my history is, with Stellenbosch Football Club. I did the recruitment there for, I was at the club for half a decade. So, my title there was the head of technical analysis, but I am very data driven. I focus, similar to how you would see in, Brentford, Brighton, the models that they use. And, I've now tried to bring that to Sundowns and, develop the recruitment team as well. So that, in future, when we are looking for players, it's not just the eye test, it's also a lot of dates that will go into that.
Now, Ryan, you spoke about being data-driven, and I like that form, because as we spoke about earlier, there is more to just the players, the managers. How does your data-driven perspective impact your manager, Rhulani Mokwena, and his players? What do you provide him with that gives you guys the edge over the competition?
So look, when it comes to data, I get quite frustrated because obviously it's a very nuanced aspect in football at the moment, and everyone tries to claim that they're into data and everything. And I say there's levels, just like there's levels to coaching and there's levels to whatever there is. There's levels to data, and you don't know what you don't know. That's definitely one thing that I've learned when it comes to data. I might meet Billy Bean, for example, in Moneyball, and then there's something that you learn there that you never even expected. You never even crossed your mind. So data, you can manipulate it and you can control it exactly how you want to. And if Steve Compella, one of the coaches at the club, he has the famous saying of statistics is like a bikini. It shows a lot but not everything. Which, as I say, if you don't know, you don't know. So if you're looking at ball possession and you're looking at just passes, then yes, it's not going to show you everything. But in modern football, and with like StatsBomb, Y-Scout, Instat, which fortunately at Sundowns we have all three, you get access to event data. So it's at event level. So what happens is, for example, let's just say the kickoff. The kickoff is taken, it'll say player X. We can say Ryan Giggs. He took the kickoff and he used his left foot and the ball went 5 meters and it went this angle. It went from X location to the X and Y location, where it started, where it finished. And then once you have all of those events and you have it for every game in every season, and in every league, you now all of a sudden have a very big picture, because you have at the end of the season, you have over 1 billion data points, because every action ultimately is an event. And then you must also remember it's also not just about the pass, it's about the receiver as well. So you get progressive passes, progressive carriers, progressive receivers, so you can build models and then you can profile players, very specifically, where are they going to receive, and then what impact do they have on the match. So it's not just about putting in a cross. Is the cross put into the right location? Where did the cross finish? How long was the player on the ball before he made the cross? How many meters has that player gained when he's in possession? How many line-breaking passes did he make? How many players did he leave, behind when he received the ball compared to where he finished with the ball? And as I say, once you start doing that for every event, you get a very clear picture of who the best players are. It's StatsBomb do have a very cool statistic. It's called on-ball value, where they actually create a probability of whether you will increase or decrease the team's likelihood of scoring based on what you did. So if you pass the ball sideways instead of forward, or you'll actually increase or decrease. And then you also get a kind of a statistic, for every match, it'll say you increase the team's chance of scoring by 20%, for example. So, and then you have that again for every single event. So you can then create the heat maps for it. And Coach Rhulani, he's very modern. He's very intelligent. He loves football. He watches a lot of football. He doesn't sleep too much. He really, really does. He analyzes every game, whether it's in Japan or Germany or whatever. And he wants all information for him to make the best decisions. So my role is just to assist him in being able to make those decisions. So, for example, this is something that probably no club in South Africa can do, but we have statistics which value your ability to play within 1 second. So if you have the ball within 1 second or under 1 second, then how good are you at doing that? Because we want to move the ball very fast. So we can statistically see which players are best at that. And that is, that's one thing that I've brought to the club, and Rhulani is interested in, how many meters can we make within the duration that the time is on the ball of that player. So it's just helping the coach make informed decisions. That's all I try to do.
You speak about Rhulani, you speak about him being a modern coach, you speak about him being a poor sleeper because he's so dedicated to the game, okay? What would you say, besides that, what are his greatest attributes as a manager that he's getting such great performances out of the players?
So I would say the first thing is he's also very open. So, if Fleming comes to him and gives him an idea, he listens. If I want to speak to him, he listens. If, Coach Wendell has an idea, he'll listen. He takes various input, and then he can take in so much information and then make informed decisions. A coach will never, ever, always make the correct decision, because you never know what the correct decision is. But what you try to do is you make decisions that you believe will best influence the club. And that is what he's very good at. Is he wants all the information. He wants, whether it's the sports science, whether it's, the technical data, whether it's the analyst's opinion, whether it's, he wants to see the drone footage specifically on the shape. He wants to watch the opponent. He wants to know everything. For example, we play Orlando Pirates tomorrow. He wants to know everything that they do and how they do it and why they do it. So, to be honest, his dedication is his biggest strength. Is he wants all the information, and then he wants to watch, and he wants to be, as informed as he can be. He wants to win, and he understands that to win, you have to be dedicated. And aside from that, he is very. So I've only worked with two head coaches, Rhulani and Coach Steve Parker at Stellenbosch. Very different, but also quite similar in the sense where they want to understand the humans that they work with. So they, for example, I have a close relationship with my father, and one of the first things that Rhulani came and spoke to me about was, when he can meet him, if we can have a braai. He wants to engage with the people that he works with closely. He wants to know what's important to you, how you tick. So, and I mean, that's also with the players. So he wants relationships, and that's also very key. Players will work, for a coach that wants to understand them.
I think those are beautiful attributes to know, that there's the psychological aspect, and the head coach really wants to get to know the human as well as the player, as well as the coaching staff. Those are such lovely attributes. And coming back to you and your role, does your role have an umbrella of the entire structure, or only just the first team, right?
So no, my role is inclusive of all the teams. The women, the youth, the recruitment team, the analysis team, first team. So the way we kind of look at it is the wheel, and then you have a lot of spires, that come out of the wheel, and then each one is important in keeping the structure of the team. So, if one breaks, then that part of the wheel is, it's gonna falter. So, for us, we treat, every single department, and we kind of manage, every department. They are heads of their departments, and we just aim to, assist them in developing what we really want, and then also being a link between the various departments, because there's so many. It's very easy to fall through the cracks and not really have, close contact, where we want to, for example, the recruitment team and the youth academy, they have to work together, and it's very easy to then just get stuck in a silo, and then you only work within your own department and you don't really interact with everyone else. And our role is kind of we want the guys at the recruitment team to know the coaches at the youth team, because they must also know which players to look for, what the coaches want, and what the women's team wants. So we kind of try to bridge the gap between the various departments, and so I'm very much for youth football. I think South African football really needs a revolution when it comes to youth development and how the country runs its youth academies, because at the moment it's very, laissez-faire. SAFA, to be honest, don't do too much, on the ground, to assist. So yeah, I'm very, youth driven, and I want to uplift South African football to get us back to a standard where we have players in the Premier League and La Liga. And because one key thing is for Sundowns to be the best club in Africa, there is a 5 foreign rule. So you can't just go buy so many players. you need your local players to be, as good as they can be. So you also then need to develop that. So you need to make sure that the South African talent that you have is of the standard that is the best in Africa. And it's very difficult when there isn't youth structures, because then you're relying on other teams, which is not really what we want to do at Sundowns. We want to rely on ourselves. If a team does develop a player and he is very good and he's interesting to us, then we will, yes, go purchase someone. But Cassius Mayalula is a good example. He's he scored 9 goals this season already, and he's he started like a house on fire. And at 21 years old, through the academy, you don't have to go buy him, and he's local. He's young. You can have him for the next 12 years. So we need more of those types of players that come in from a young age, and that they understand the philosophy of the club because they've been brought up through it. They completely are embedded into the infrastructure of the club. So yeah, there's lots of departments that we work with, and one of my big passion projects at the moment is specifically the youth academy.
Before I hand over to Zayn, Ryan, my next question is focused around your style of play, your pattern. Because if you looked at the current World Cup that has just left us, which is, I think, one of the best World Cups we've had in my lifetime, a lot of the teams that were very successful didn't have that much possession of the ball. Okay, one of the teams that had most possession went out quite early, Spain. I think they're still passing it around in Qatar, if I'm mistaken. That's how much they pass this ball around. But when we look at a style of play, so what could you say to me is Sundowns' trademark style of play? Because I'll give you an example. When I was at Rangers, our style of play was 3 at the back, kick in the channels, cross the ball, George scores. Simple. It had no creativity, nothing. Break down Sundowns' style of play for us.
Without giving away any secrets, we're a possession dominant team, naturally. Possession is a very interesting statistic as well. So I don't look at it in percentages. You break it down in a couple different phases. So one being, how long in a game do you have the ball? So yes, a match is 90 minutes. So when people look at it and say you've had 60% possession, it's not necessarily meaning that you've had 60% of the 90. Because as you saw at the World Cup, they've started now including in the no contest, the no contest possession. So ball in play and ball in control is very important. And what you'll find is teams that want to play, like Spain, more possession based, they will have large amounts of ball in play time. So their ball in play time will be very high. Where teams that play long balls, naturally they will, the ball goes out a lot more often. There's a lot more fouls, and so their ball in play time is a lot less. And a theory that I developed is based on the mathematical philosophy of variable change. So there's kind of 3 ways. There's different ways you can play football, but there's 3 kind of overarching philosophies, and that's obviously long ball. Then there's the counter-attacking, and then there's possession-based. And the way you do them can differ, but that's kind of the 3 overarching things. And then mathematically, it also makes sense. There's a reason why Burnley, for example, will play long ball football, because if they play Man City and they try to keep possession against them, they don't have the individual quality to beat them. So if they want to beat them, they have to create a lot more 50-50s, because the individual duels actually are 70-30. So the way you beat them is you now trying to create more 50-50. So you kick it long, it's in the air. Now it's you versus me. It's a 50-50. Then it's a second ball. It's a 50-50. So now the game becomes a lot more competitive when it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be as good as the other team. And then, your counter-attacking teams generally, they have a few better players than the opponent, but maybe not enough. So that's similar to France. France are very good at that. And where that is very important is you have to, as a person in football, you have to not let your ego get the best of you. So you have to understand, you have to look at their team, like France do often, and they say, listen, we probably have 6 players that are better than their players, but then there's maybe 5 that are competitive, and we can't just dominate the ball against them because they're also good players. So you can't just do that. And then what you do with counter-attack football, your transitions, is you're trying to create chaos because you trust, because you have, you know, the 6 individuals. And if you develop your structure, you know, in such a way that you can play on counter-attack, because your counter-attack chances that you create will always be the best ones. You know, counter-attacking chances are generally your one-on-ones. You know, it's cutbacks. It's very good high-level chances. You know, there's a lot of probability in scoring goals from those types of. So you want to create those. And then there's your possession, you know. So like, for example, if Mamelodi Sundowns play against Maritzburg, we expect to have 70% possession. There's nothing we can do to stop. You know, we can't just kick the ball back. So, you know, they will play a low block and we're going to have to break it down. And then you have to find different ways to break it down. And that's where you have to learn how to create chaos. So, you know, you get into position. So there's the control phase, there's the progression phase. And once you get into the creative phase, you know, you want players to play creative passes, because there's twofold. Once you play a creative pass, you obviously increase your chance of scoring, because you're trying something. If it lands on the striker's foot or whatever, you know, you created the chance. And 2, you actually don't mind losing the ball there. So if you try the pass and you're in the final third, worst case scenario, you lose it, but you lose it in front of a defender. And what the one thing is, the defender, he hasn't had the opportunity to look up. So a defender is obviously defending. He's focused at the player with the ball, or maybe he's, you know, screening for the opposition. But once he gets the ball back, so now we've tried to play a pass, the defender has the ball. He hasn't had the opportunity to know where his players are. So he still has to get his head up and look. So that's where counter pressing is very important. So now this player, as he wants to look up, your players are already in position to counter press, because you've progressed to the final third and you have a lot of players in the final third, and that defender hasn't scanned. So then you can counter press, and then all of a sudden you've created a counter attack in the final third. So that's kind of the philosophy in general, to not obviously explain how we do it, but that's what you're trying to do. You want to get to the final third, you want to try things, and then you counter press to win the ball back in the final third, and then you can create, you know, good chances from that, because players are out of position then, and, you know, so your style of play, it's definitely something. And that's also one thing that I do enjoy, is what matters. So, for example, possession, it has a plateau. So there's a level, the graph kind of goes and then it declines again. So if you have too much, that's a bad thing. If you have too little, that's a bad thing. You know, there's a happy medium, kind of the way to operate. But then it's also very interesting but you do want to keep the ball for long phases. So if you keep the ball, you don't want to keep it for short stints. You want to keep it for long, but not too many times. So that is also a very interesting concept that you know is with the statistics that is coming into football. How long do you want to keep the ball, and how often? So that's why sometimes, as I say, losing the ball is not a bad thing. Just where you lose it is important, because when you lose it, if you counter press very well, that will be your best way of creating chances.
I think that's a fantastic breakdown and great explanation of the philosophy without giving it away, but also about
I feel cheated, Zayn. I feel cheated. Honestly, I feel cheated. You know what, Zayn, I'm listening to Ryan and I'm thinking back to when we played under Gordon. His analysis was, wet the pitch, it's Friday night, wear 6 studs. 3 points, you know.
Did you win the league? Did you win the league?
We won the league with a Jurassic style of football, Zayn.
That's
so
okay.
imagine how poor the other teams
Ryan
were.
said, you were getting the one-on-ones, because then it's 70-30.
Oh, man, I love what you've just said. You know, you're developing not just footballers, educated footballers. That's brilliant. Over to you, Zayn. Go ahead, sir.
No, that's all good. That's all good. I'm sort of going to deviate from the question I had, because you've got me interested in this now, Ryan. But as somebody who works in analysis, what is the stat you look at first? Please don't be cheeky and tell me the score. But what is the one that interests you the most? And secondly, as laymen like myself who watch football, what should we be looking out for? Because I know we always like to talk about XG. What's the XG? And then we all sound smarter than we really are. But what is the stat you look out for? And what is the one, as consumers of the game, as laymen, we should be looking at?
So personally, mine is I have access to information. Unfortunately, as a consumer, you probably wouldn't. But speed of the ball. So if you can move the ball faster than 2.6 meters per second, you increase your chance of winning drastically. So the ball moving fast is very important in football. And that would be, I want to know exactly how fast teams move the ball. So that would be the first thing that I look at, is and how do they move it? Is it from longer balls or is it, but specifically how quick does the ball move? Because whether you're dribbling or whether you're carrying it or whether you're passing it, there's different ways to do it, but I want to know how quickly you do it, because I know if you're moving the ball quickly, then you're a good team. You can almost make a log table on ball speed, and it will almost perfectly mimic expected points table. It is a very good indication. So the funny thing when you speak about expected goals is a very good statistic. But what you have to understand is how. So it's not just now saying, okay, the expected goals was 2 and the other team was 1. How was it 2? How did they get it? What type of chances did they create? Was it 30 long shots or was it 3, one-on-ones? Or, so you have to understand how it happens, which is more important to me. So, for example, if I'm looking for a striker, if I'm trying to sign a striker, often when you ask people, as you say, the cheeky comment is people always look for goals. But I don't look for goals. Goals isn't actually something that I look for. Goals are a consequence of what you do, throughout the game. So for me, what is more important is, one, do you get chances? It's the first thing I look at. And players that get chances will naturally score. That's just a common, And then what's your conversion rate over a long period of time? So if you're converting chances at a 30% ratio over 5 seasons, then I know you can finish. So for example, Lionel Messi, probably the greatest footballer ever, he converts at 27%. That's not particularly high. But what he's very effective at is he gets twice as many chances as an average player. So that's what he's very good at. And then you get certain players that will get a lot less chances, but they will convert maybe at 40%. So you have to understand, that part of the kind of the way things happen is actually more important than the actual final event. So like Darwin Núñez, I know is a good topic of conversation, is he converts, previously at a low rate, but he gets a lot of chances. So he will naturally score goals at the end of the season, but he might be the meme, after the game because he will miss a couple, because he's not going to score hat tricks every game, but he will score goals. And, that's what the club will need at that, in that player. You might have a Salah who will convert at a higher rate, but you'll get a lot less chances. So you want different types of players as well. You don't want 3 players that are all identical. You want, players to also combine. And when you're creating a team, you look at all of those things. So you say, what type of chances does this player create? Because you want the striker he wants these type of chances. So this guy has to create those type of chances. And then where does he create those type of chances? And then you have to look at, which midfielder is best at getting the ball to that position where the guy can create those type of chances so that the guy can score those, type of chances. So, but all of that comes down to ball speed. If the ball moves too slow, you can't break down any team. If a player receives it and, they often say in the pocket or whatever, all that's happened is you move the ball faster than the team could get into position. So obviously the compactness that a team wants to have, you moved it so fast that the player hasn't been able to get compact yet. So now he has an extra second to make a decision. And that's why Kevin De Bruyne gets to receive and turn, more regularly than any player in the Premier League. It's just because City move the ball so fast that he gets to receive, turn, get his head up, and play the delivery, So he doesn't necessarily move the ball very quickly, but Bernardo Silva does, Gundogan does, Rodri does, Cancelo does. And all of them have to move it very fast so that De Bruyne gets an extra second on the ball. And that's why I say ball speed is the most important.
I look at that Sundowns squad, and where it's maybe different to some of the other top African teams with recruitment is that it strikes me that there are 3 South Americans in the squad. You have Gaston Sereno from Uruguay, Marcelo Holanda from Chile, you have Erwin Saavedra from Bolivia. How is it that Sundowns have come to find South American play so important to what you do? What are the stats that are being seen there? Why is South America so fertile for recruitment? Is that something you have some insight on?
Yeah, yeah. So I brought Junior Mendieta to Stellenbosch as well. So the South American market is, look, in Africa we like football, in South America they love football. That is their lifeblood. But there's a couple of reasons. So one is the infrastructure is also not very, not very developed. So the fields aren't necessarily very good, which is similar to in Africa. The weather conditions are quite similar. One day it can be hot, the next day it can be raining. So the adaptability becomes quite easy. It's easy for them to adapt to our climate and our way of living. And then also they are very technical footballers. So in South Africa, and every region kind of has a difference. So like Senegal, for example, you're not going to expect to find very technical players, but what you will find is very physical players, not just in strength, but in, athletic ability. They're very quick. They, think of like Sadio Mane, although he is also quite technical, but that is the type of Senegalese player you get with Diarras and, those type of players. Where in South Africa, we're also quite similar. We have athletic players, not very technical players. So that's why when we do have a technical player, he stands out, above the rest, like a Teko Modise said. Because it's not normal for us. We don't naturally produce those type of players. Where in South America, that is their natural type of player. They don't necessarily have physical players. So to create a balanced team, South American players assist us because not everyone is a runner. You need some people to run, and some people to be physical, but then you also need the players that can move the ball and play one touch and receive on the turn and have a little bit of a different type of flair. South Africans have flair, but South Americans have a different type of flair, and that's where you create a bit more balance with South Americans. Europeans play in a very structured way, which is not really common to South African football. We don't really have structure yet, and that can be looked at from grassroots level. You can look at when players are playing in a township and they're using a dustbin as the goal, and it's very unstructured. It's just how we develop. And in Europe, it's very opposite. So it's very structured. So if you bring a European player here, you have to be cautious just in the sense that they might rely on structure. They might need structure to perform the way they do. It's not a perfect science. There's obviously very, very good footballers in Europe. It's just if you only allowed 5 foreign spaces, what's your risk to reward? You don't want to make mistakes with those players. And South America, generally, you at least get players that will fit in quite comfortably.
Ryan, your team is flourishing. That's the only way I can describe it. They are the dominant force in South Africa. They have been, they continue to be. But looking at this current season, having spoken to people like Kevin Johnson, Gavin Hunt, who are in different teams, from someone looking from the outside like Kevin Hunt, who do you guys perceive as your greatest threat this season?
Probably Orlando Pirates. Obviously, and we're playing them tomorrow, which does make it a big game for us. But Orlando Pirates are becoming a lot more modern in the way they do things as well. So Stellenbosch was obviously the first club to get data, which was obviously as a result of myself. But now, Pirates have, Cape Town City have got on board. Teams are beginning to catch up. And their particular skill is they're a well-coached team, but their defenders are very, very good. I'm a big admirer of Orlando Pirates defense. I believe that, they have 4 centre-backs that will probably be in the top 5 in the country, top 6, top 7, but they have very, very effective defenders. So they're difficult to beat. Everyone looks at they don't score too many goals, whatever, but they don't concede too many either. You can win the game 1-0. So I admire the team a lot, and I think that the more the coach gets, obviously now during the World Cup, I'm sure they go on the training ground a lot. So yeah, they will be a big threat. To be honest, for me, they are probably the the second best team in South Africa at the moment. And then, to be honest, after that, I would say Cape Town City. Cape Town City are a very effective team. They have been for a long time. They miss a lot of chances at the moment, but that won't be consistent. So as soon as they do start scoring chances, then they're going to be, putting teams to the sword, because they actually create the highest XG in the league. They create the most chances. So they just haven't converted at a good rate yet. So Cape Town City is also a very, very good team, and they're very, very good players. I'm very impressed with their structure and the way they run the club.
Now, a lot in this conversation that we're having around the braai, you've spoken about your time at Stellenbosch, who, having spoken to a couple of the players, Ryan Moon, and has told us about the facilities and the approach Stellenbosch has taken. How did your move come about from Stellenbosch to Sundowns? You've gone from possibly, I think, one of the best places to live in the world, number one. And then you get recruited by a juggernaut like Sundowns. How did this come about?
So look, what happened was, I was at Stellenbosch for half a decade. Very, very, enjoyed my time there. The facilities are, very, very good. I would probably say that it could be the best in the country. And the Stellenbosch Academy of Sport that is there, the culture that it brings with the South African Sevens rugby team and the Olympic athletes that come, and there's a high performance culture. There's a culture of being athletic and treating yourself like an athlete. So I've also learned a lot from that. And then everything is very modern at Stellenbosch. So the club is very open to, and specifically the coach or coaches, Coach Steve Barker and Wesley, and even, Evangelos, the DDC coach. But it's very, they want the sports science, but like when I say the sports science, I mean it to the next level. They want data before anyone. Stellenbosch was the first club to get StatsBomb in the country, the second club in Africa behind Al Ahly. So they want everything to be as modern as possible. So the club doesn't necessarily spend a lot of money, but when it does spend money, it has to be in innovative and new things, because for the club to compete, it doesn't have the finances similar to some of the bigger teams. So it runs sustainably by being able to identify, hidden gems, like Sibongi Senium, Tetwa, Junior Mendietas. The club we don't have to buy those players. We get them, for free, or, for a very limited amount of money. And, no one really knows who they are. And then in a year's time, everyone's now saying that you should be in the Bafana team, so, but that's not just then, it's the sports science, all of that. So you're completely correct in Stellenbosch, and the club will be, in 3 years' time, it'll be better than where it is now. And in 5 years' time, it'll be better. The club will always develop. It's a very good club to go to. For young players, I would recommend Stellenbosch because of the facilities, because of the culture, because, you have access to things that you don't have access to in many teams. So, and then what happened was, because I was so influential and so involved at Stellenbosch and in these innovative ideas, I actually did my UEFA B course with Rhulani, and I met Rhulani through that. And then after speaking to him a bit, he was like, listen, you have to be at Sundowns. And he then put me, we had a meeting at the end of last year with the senior management. And I don't think they necessarily saw where I would fit in at the time, because obviously Fleming wasn't there yet. And then when the club got Fleming on board, then they actually told Fleming that, because he asked for an assistant, he wanted an assistant, and then they said, Fleming, I think you should meet Ryan. And then he actually flew to Cape Town. We had a meeting, and then after that they said, listen, we want you on board. And I did also speak to Kaizer Chiefs, Kaizer Junior. I do appreciate Kaizer Junior very much. I was very close to going to Kaizer Chiefs. But at the end, the relationship with Fleming was very important. And then I spoke to senior management, and we got the deal done. I liked where the club wanted to be. As you say, the juggernaut. The club wants to even improve on that. So the philosophy is it always has to be the best. So You know, even if it is the best, it has to improve to become even better. If you win by 3 points in the league, that's not enough. It wants to win by, 10 points. So it's the high level winning mentality is definitely something that I want to learn from, because look, my ultimate goal is to be the director of football at Chelsea. So, learning from people is the most important thing for my career right now. So yeah, the move was a long and it was a big decision to make, because also I very much enjoyed my time at Stellenbosch.
I have to say, Ryan, that is fantastic detail on how the move came about. And I love to hear that you want to be a director of football at Chelsea, because that was a club that actually empowered an African and Michael Emenalo for the longest time when Roman Abramovich was in charge of the club, a key decision maker. We know that it was a rolling door with managers.
Roman
We
insisted
also
on
know
him,
the success.
right? Yeah. Roman insisted on
Michael,
him.
in many ways, was he was the
Assistant.
the brain or the decision maker, the closest to Roman. So, I think that's fantastic to have that goals. We see what Benny's doing. We see Colo, who's been appointed at Wigan. I mean, we're hoping that, and part of our podcast is changing the narrative on how people do their recruitment and realizing there's a Pitso Masamane, there's a Walid Radrugi before they get the jobs that they get to. So, I certainly think it's fantastic that you have that ambition. But what's going to be crucial to that ambition is Sundowns' continued success and also success in Africa. And I have to ask you, from the club's perspective, where does the CAF Champions League fall in your list of priorities? Is it the top priority? Is it the Premier Soccer League, that is? How does it rank in how you guys are targeting things this season?
To be honest, it is the only priority. Winning in South Africa is seen as a secondary target. It's expected rather than we're not trying to win the league. You have to win the league. If you don't win the league, there's consequences. So the Champions League is to be honest, it is the only ambition of the club. I've learned that very quickly, and I learned that before, during the interview process and speaking to senior management and stuff. So all the questions are based around how can you assist us in winning the Champions League. No one, no one's asking about how to win the PSL. The club very much knows how to do that. But yeah, the priority every season is always Champions League, and unfortunately, we haven't been too successful in the Champions League recently. One semi-final since we won it in 6 years. A couple quarterfinals, group stage exit. It's not very effective, and it's not where the club wants to be. So yeah, that is, we want to be winning it. We want to be seen as a Al Ahly, Real Madrid, for the continent. Palmeiras, Flamengo, they're dominating in South America at the moment. So yeah, we that's the club's ambition. We want to be playing Club World Cup, as often as we can be.
Ryan, thank you for joining us on the pod. You have been incredible to listen to. And for those of you listening out there, please find us on our social media accounts at OTW_podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook and YouTube. You can search and find us there. Let us know how you think Sundowns will do in the Champions League this year. Is it the year that they bring the prized trophy, wrestle it away from that North African dominance and bring it down south? Let us know what you think. And let us know also what you think about when you watch football, what you think is the most important stat, and how Ryan might have changed what you look for. Ryan, a pleasure. Thank you for coming on. We wish you all the best with Sundowns this season, domestically and in Africa. And we certainly hope that you'll be on the show in some capacity before the season ends with one of your medals.
Thank you very much. I've appreciated it. Yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you guys around the braai, as you say. And definitely we'll keep in contact. Yeah, I've very much enjoyed it.